Children are our future. They're the ones that are going to inherit the world we leave behind, and they're also the ones that are going to take over our jobs once we retire. Give it a few years, and little Ashton Jr. will be all grown up and doing lists just like her mum. Successful video game franchises are built on the backs of iconic heroes and villains, but even the best of them are bound to get long in the tooth eventually. And that's when it might be time for somebody new to swoop in and take the reins. The story jumps forward a decade or two. Everyone we knew from the games before is now old or dead, and there's a gaggle of fresh-faced youngsters in the spotlight. Sometimes this kind of refresh can be just what the Doctor ordered to keep a series alive, but just as often, it goes over about as well as a lead blimp in a who can crash your blimp the fastest competition. I'm Ashton from Triple Jump, and here are 10 games that introduced a new generation of characters. Number 10, F-Zero Maximum Velocity. You know what they say, time moves fast, but futuristic high-tech racing machines go even faster. I know no one actually says that, but darn it they should. Originally set in the year 2560, the F-Zero series of racing games focuses on the titular Grand Prix and the often bizarre cast of characters who compete in it. This series is probably most well known to many for the appearance of its leading man, Captain Falcon, in the Super Smash Bros. Series. I mean, who could forget the man that gave the world the Falcon Punch? F-Zero's first foray onto handhelds was a launch title for the Game Boy Advance, and a new generation of handheld needed a new generation of racers. Taking place 25 years after the previous games, F-Zero Maximum Velocity brought in a fresh lineup of faces to replace the old standbys. Several of the rookies had connections to the previous cast in their backstories. For example, Kent Akechi, pilot of the Falcon Mk2, is alleged to be the son of Captain Falcon. Alleged family connections or no, the Maximum Velocity cast didn't stick around for long before the series went back to its classic line of veterans. Probably for the best. Kent Punch doesn't have the same ring as Falcon Punch. Number 9, Layton's Mystery Journey. Professor Layton is famous for his ability to solve puzzles, arguably more so than he's famous for whatever his actual job is. But eventually it was time for him to solve the most complicated puzzle of them all. Parenting. After starring in 6 games, the dear old professor was overdue for a holiday, and the developers at Level 5 announced that they would be retiring him as a protagonist going forward. In his place, they introduced Catriel Layton, private investigator and the daughter of Professor Layton himself. Alongside her assistant and a talking dog, because all detectives have talking dogs, you know, she investigates a series of mysteries across London while solving numerous riddles and brain teasers. Catriel's adventures are much lower stakes than her father's, more of the help find a missing pet than the save London from being destroyed by a time-travelling madman variety. Unfortunately, the reviews for her debut adventure were mixed at best, with critics complaining about the lack of a strong overarching plot and the lower quality of puzzles on offer compared to previous games. Catriel's first adventure would seemingly be her last for the time being, as a new game starring the returning Professor Layton was announced for the Nintendo Switch in 2023. Truly a puzzling turn of events. Number 8, Okamiden. Okami was a critical darling when it first came out, a beautiful fantasy adventure starring the sun goddess Amaterasu, on a quest to save Japan using the power of a magical paintbrush. A gorgeous art style, innovative gameplay, and memorable characters ultimately led to it being heralded by many as one of the greatest video games ever made. That's a lot of pressure for anyone to live up to, but the developers of Okamiden felt like they had a good idea on their hands. Taking advantage of the Nintendo DS's unique features, Okamiden took many of the ingredients that made the original Okami so beloved, but added a fresh flavour in the form of new protagonist Chibi Terasu, the adorable son of Amaterasu. Despite being positioned as a spiritual successor rather than a sequel of Okami, Okamiden plays out very much like a continuation of the same story. On his quest, Chibi Terasu encounters not only the children of other Japanese gods, but the son of his mother's former allies as well. Even though it was living in one of the world's longest shadows, Okamiden managed to stand on its own 2 feet, its own 4 paws, and launched to positive reviews and strong sales. Of course, how could you say no to someone so cute? Oh, who's a good boy? Number 7, Soul Calibur 5. For whatever reason, fighting games in particular seem to enjoy ditching their old characters in favour of younger, hotter versions. Tekken did it, Mortal Kombat did it, and, to the ire of many, Soul Calibur did it too. Taking place 18 years after the fourth game, the story of Soul Calibur 5 focuses on the children, students and successors of many classic characters from the series, and also Ezio for some reason. With more newcomers than any game since the first Soul Calibur, somebody had to get out of the way to make room, which led to many of those classic characters being cut. Fans grumbled over the game's roster, as many of their long-standing favourites were nowhere to be found, and in their place was Patroclus, the new main protagonist, and also the man with the dubious honour of being labelled the most hated character in the Soul Calibur series. The reception to the new roster was so frosty that it put the franchise on ice for 6 years, the longest hiatus it had ever had at that point, and when a new instalment finally did emerge, it was a reboot that took the story back to its beginnings, which also seems to be a favourite move of fighting games. Number 6, Tales of Destiny 2. The Tales series of RPGs has many installments, but for the most part, they are each self-contained stories with no connections to each other, except when they are connected. If that's confusing, well, it's about to get even more confusing. Tales of Destiny was only the second game in the long-running series, and is also one of the few entries to get a direct sequel, fittingly called Tales of Destiny 2. That's not to be confused with Tales of Destiny Roman numerals 2, which was the English title for a completely unrelated game in the series. Got all that? Good. Me neither. Tales of Destiny 2 is a direct follow-up to the events of its predecessor, set 18 years later, and focuses on the exploits of Kyle, the son of the previous game's main characters, Stan and Ruti. While Stan is tragically absent from Kyle's life, other heroes from the first Tales of Destiny reappear as well, usually wrapped up in the nefarious machinations of the game's antagonists. Tales of Destiny 2 unfortunately never got an official release outside of Japan, probably because we already had a Tales of Destiny 2. And of course, they couldn't just call it Tales of Destiny 3, because that would confuse people. Number 5, Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. Every hero needs a good mentor on their journey. Their ultimate reward might be to become the mentor to the next generation of heroes, or if they crash and burn, it can be a decent consolation prize. The original trilogy of Ace Attorney games, starring the man in blue Phoenix Wright, are some of the most highly regarded adventure games of all time. But after giving Phoenix a well-deserved happy ending in the third game, the future of the series was a big question mark for several years until the announcement of Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. Originally conceived as a complete refresh for the series, the new game was set to be a clean break from the old installments, with a completely original cast of characters, spearheaded by the new protagonist, Apollo, but pushback from the team led to the inclusion of an older, grungier Phoenix to take the new legal eagle under his wing. Flanked by some more returning faces, and the introduction of Phoenix's daughter, Apollo Justice Ace Attorney successfully managed to bridge the past and future of the series together. But it begs the question, why does every lawyer in this series need to have such weird spiky hair? Maybe it's to help get their point across. Number 4, King's Quest III. To gamers of a certain vintage, King Graham will always be considered one of gaming's greatest heroes. The man who would be king of Daventry was the star of 2 excellent adventure games that became beloved classics. But as Graham got older, it was time for the adventurer's cap to be passed on to a new generation. Enter Gwydion, an unassuming young man and the star of King's Quest III. At the outset, Gwydion is the indentured servant to the evil wizard Manannán, wearing nothing but rags and sleeping on a bed that probably has more rats than feathers in the pillows. But as his own adventure begins, Gwydion soon finds out that he is Alexander, the long-lost son of King Graham and the rightful prince of Daventry. Hot on the heels of two big successes, it was a daring choice to step away from the protagonist who'd brought the series so far. But fortunately, it was one that paid off. Alexander proved himself to be a character every bit as endearing as his father, while having a personality and story all his own. And in doing so, opened the door for his sister and mother to have their own adventures. King's Quest, fun for the whole family in more ways than one. Number 3, Pokemon Gold and Silver. Wildcard entry, I choose you! These days, the very thought of a Pokemon game not being a wild success is laughable, but back in the late 90s, it was far from the towering juggernaut of a franchise we now know it as. When the time came to make a second installment, the developers had their work cut out for them trying to prove that this series wasn't going to be just one and done. Unlike later generations of Pokemon games, Gold and Silver were positioned more as direct sequels to Red and Blue, following up on the events of the same story a few years later. Several NPCs the player meets are connected to previous characters in the series, but more importantly than that, these were the games that introduced baby Pokemon, the squishably soft and cuddly pre-evolutions of existing Pokemon. Yes, just when you think Pikachu couldn't possibly get any cuter, they go ahead and introduce Pichu. Gold and Silver needed to prove that connectable pocket monsters were more than just a passing fad, and it succeeded that with aplomb, by not only cementing the status of existing Pokemon as iconic characters, but introducing a whole new batch that became just as beloved. You know what they say, make new friends but keep the old. One is Silver and the other Gold. Number 2, Street Fighter 3 and Garou Mark of the Wolves. The histories of Capcom and SNK are so inextricably linked that it only made sense to talk about them together for this entry. Street Fighter 3 had the unenviable task of following up on the most popular fighting game of all time. So rather than trying to go bigger, Capcom decided to go weirder. The moveset of series regular Guile was inherited by newcomer Remy, and longtime veteran Ken would be replaced by his disciple Sean. No veterans were planned to return, though a few managed to sneak their way in after fans labelled the new generation as freaks. While the game would go on to become a classic, the backlash to its roster inspired Capcom to take several cautious steps backwards for the next installment. Not to be outdone, SNK released their answer to Street Fighter 3 a couple of years later in the form of Garou Mark of the Wolves, a new installment in the Fatal Fury series. They kept one character from previous games, that being series protagonist Terry Bogard, and fleshed out the rest of the roster with the sons, pupils, and brothers-in-law of other legacy characters. Unlike Street Fighter, the Fatal Fury series didn't move backwards after Garou. It just stopped moving at all for about 25 years. After that long a wait, it's probably time for a new generation. And number 1, Golden Sun Dark Dawn. Nintendo's history is littered with forgotten franchises that have legions of fans trying to resurrect them through some manner of dark rituals, or failing that, a strongly worded petition. Golden Sun is one of many such series, originally a duology of RPGs released for the Game Boy Advance that tells the tale of a party of magically empowered youths on a quest to save the world from destruction. Renowned for its exploration and character building systems, fans were left clamouring for more after the end of the story. And more is exactly what fans would receive in 2010 with the release of a third Golden Sun game, Dark Dawn, for the Nintendo DS. Taking place a full 3 decades after the end of the second game, Dark Dawn sees said youths from the original game all grown up and parenting an entirely new crop of magically empowered youths who have to, you guessed it, save the world from destruction. You know, just once, I wish the world would actually stay saved, after we went through all the trouble of saving it. Dark Dawn was well received by critics and fans, but underperformed commercially, and the series has been left dormant ever since. Despite many heartfelt pleas from fans, it seems the world will not need to be saved from destruction a 4th time anytime soon.